Now that we've joined all of our motifs together, we are ready to add the borders. Now we're going to be doing this in a slightly unusual way. I don't know if you've maybe tried this or not before. We're going to be adding, rather than going round the border, we're going to do panels in rows. And we're going to, it's too long to get all on the camera here, we're going to do 2 panels on either side of the long edges that we have here. And you'll see from the diagram which way round that is. It's a rectangle basically. And then the short panels we will then do that then overlap the sides, and that will all become clear as we make them. So bear with me. We're going to begin with these long edges, and what I've done already, I have done the first version of it just to show you what it looks like. I haven't weaved in my ends yet, don't judge me. So what we're going to do is work along this long edge here, back and forth in rows, and we're going to add these kind of little floral pops here at the corner. It's kind of my take on the floral stitch that you see here, there and everywhere, and it's got these long stitches that overlap onto the top of it and back down into where these flowers are. So it uses all of the colours in the palette that we have, but if you want to switch your colours around, then please feel free to do so. Absolutely go for it. I would love to see it in different versions. But if you want to follow the way that I've done it, so pop to the pattern and get your colour sequence ready, get your pattern ready, and we will crack on and get this panel done. So we're ready to begin section 6 together, and we are going to use the same size hook, and we're going to use yarn A, and in the side, remember working to the side of all the stitches now, into the side of that first stitch, we pop through and scoop our yarn through, and we're going to chain 1 to get us ready to begin. Now we need 125 stitches to run all the way along this edge. Now you've got 2 options here. You can either just wing it and see how it fits comfortably for you, or you can grab some stitch markers and you can count up kind of, right, well, how many stitches do I need in this motif, how many in this, how many in this, how many in this one, and work along. And I will say, once you have done one side, it's much easier because then you can mimic what you did on the other side. So what I'm going to do is copy what I did here, my spacing here, but you just want it to sit comfortably. But you might find that 125 stitches don't necessarily work for you. You might want to add some, you might want to take some away, and if that's the case, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that it lays nice and flat. What you're going to need to do is make sure that that is a multiple of 3 plus 2 stitches. So any multiple of 3 and then add 2 to it, that's how many stitches that you'll need to have along this edge. But I'm looking upside down now, sorry, but looking at my edge here, I basically had 2 stitches in the side of any double crochet stitch, and then 1 stitch in the side of a half double crochet. That's the kind of spacing that I had and would normally use anyway for this kind of thing. So just have a go along and see how they sit and space out for you. And then at the end, just make sure that you haven't got too many or too few to add before you get to the end. Or as I say, you can pop some stitch markers along your way. So first of all, we're going to begin with these 125 stitches, and they're all going to be single crochet. So a single crochet in there, and then as I say, it's quite hard to see white in white there, isn't it? But I do 2 in the side of that double crochet stitch there. And then I do like to go, you see how we've got the loop, we've got this V running here. I quite like to go in the center of that V because it will give you a very nice, neat finish. So then that will be in the side of that stitch there. And then remember, we've got a shorter stitch here. We probably don't remember from making it, but we have a shorter stitch here. So we'll probably just put 1 in that one there. And then we've got the longer double crochet stitch. So I'll pop 2 in there and see how we go. And then we come to the bit that all goes a bit fuzzy in my mind, because there are different sizes and shapes of stitches and all sorts. So I think you just have to go nice and evenly and think about just how well you can space your stitches out. And then at the end of this motif, I would have a count up, see where you are. So I think with things like this, just don't overthink it too much. Just have a go. If it's wrong, then have another go. The most important thing that it lays flat and it's nice and even for you. And as I say, you just need to make sure that you've got a multiple of 3 plus 2. Now I don't go here in the center where this magic ring was. I make sure that I scoop past that because otherwise that can look a bit gappy sometimes. So just whiz your way along, get to the end of your motif and see how you're doing for numbers. So there we are at the end of that first motif, and you can see it sits really nice and neatly already. So that for me is a really nice spacing of stitches. So now what we need to do is count up those stitches and then see how many more, because we have one, two, 3.5 more motifs to fit in. So once you're comfy with the number that you have and you've worked out that it will fill all the way along for you, if you go consistently like that, then carry on all the way along and I will meet you back here once you've got your 125 stitches. Now we've got our 125 stitches, or however many you've chosen to do for the side of your blanket, we are going to turn our work. We're going to do this at the end of each of these rows. We're going to turn. And for row 2 of section 6, we're going to chain 1, and then we're simply going to work a single crochet into each stitch that we come across. So I've got 125 stitches and I will end up with the same 125 stitches. So here we are at the end of row 2, and I haven't completed that final stitch. We are going to change colour. So I always finish with my new colour. So I've broken my yarn and grab the next colour, which is F. So for me, that's this green, key lime green. And I'm going to yarn over and complete the final stitch with my new colour. And that's before I turn. So now we're going to turn and we'll be ready to start row 3. And now row 3 begins with a choice of stitches. Now it's entirely up to you how you work this. Obviously you can do a regular chain because it needs to be the height of a double crochet, this first stitch. You can either do a chain 3 and that counts as a stitch, but I much prefer nowadays to either do, she says, getting back to where she was, either a chain 1 but a decent sized chain 1 and then work a double crochet into that first stitch, and that is your stitch that begins your row, and that chain 1 just disappears into the side, because bear in mind we're going to be working a panel along this side and then you've then got this chain 1 to work into it. Or you can do a standing double crochet stitch. Now if you're going to do a standing double crochet, what you need to do is complete this stitch. Now to work a standing double crochet stitch, what we're going to do is yarn over twice, and the whole thing here is about keeping the tension on your ends. You're going to pop your hook through the stitch, yarn over and pull through, and you're basically just working a regular double crochet. But look, I'm holding all of these threads here in this hand to keep the tension there. Lots of people struggle with standing stitches, taller stitches as well, if you don't keep your tension correct. So then yarn over and pull through, and then that traps that there at the back, and you have got a double crochet stitch from thin air. So that's a really nice technique I really love, and I also really love when obviously this end is not going to be on show, it's not going to be a raw edge here, but when it is going to be an edge, when you're not bordering something, that works really beautifully. So then whichever version you choose, go for it and don't overthink it. Don't worry too much if that doesn't work for you. Do the version, do your turning chain, do whatever works for you. And then what we're going to do is we're going to skip the next stitch, and then in this next stitch here we're going to work a double crochet, a chain 1 and a double crochet, all in that same stitch. So we get ourselves a nice little V there. And then we are going to skip the next stitch and skip the next stitch, and then we're going to work into the next stitch here, the same as we just did, a double crochet, a chain 1 and a double crochet. So we're going to make ourselves sets of V's with 2 skip stitches in between them. So we skip these and then we work a V into the next one. Skip these 2 and then work a V into the next one. So you carry on all the way along this row until you get to the last 2 stitches, and then instead of skipping 2 stitches we'll just skip 1, and then I'll meet you there and I'll show you what we do in the very last stitch. Now here we are at the end of that row, and we have skipped those 2 stitches there, worked a V into that one, and we have 2 left. So we're going to skip this one here, and then we're going to work a double crochet into the very last stitch. Now if you want to carry on doing your standing stitches, you're going to need to complete that stitch there and then break your yarn. But if you are happy just to do turning chains or a chain 1 and a double crochet, then change your colour here on the last yarn over. So we're going to change the colour B in whichever method you would like to do it. So break this yarn here and grab yarn B and turn your work, and we'll be ready to start row 4. Now for row 4 I am going to be doing a standing stitch here, but please do whichever suits you best, and I'm going to pop a double crochet into that first stitch. So once we've completed the first stitch, we're then going to chain 1, and now what we need to do is start thinking about working in the chain 1 spaces of this row. We're always going to be working in these chain 1 spaces here, and we're going to be working a 4 double crochet cluster in each of them. So we begin our 4 double crochet cluster in this chain 1 space by yarning over, popping your hook through, scooping up that loop, yarn over and pull through 2. So you're beginning a regular double crochet stitch, but what we're not going to do is yarn over and complete that stitch as we would normally, because we need to now start our second of the stitches. So we yarn over and go through, yarn over and pull through 2. So that's our second one begun, and we've now got 3 loops on the hook. You're going to yarn over, pop into that same space, yarn over and pull through 2. So that's 1, 2, 3 we've started, and now we're going to yarn over, pop into that space, yarn over and pull through 2, and now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook, and that's 4 stitches we've begun but not finished, but we're going to yarn over and pull through all of the loops on the hook there to complete the stitch. Now next we need to chain 1 and then chain another one, and that gives us these 2 stitches here, because we can now skip these 2 stitches and not worry about them. We're then going to work into this chain 1 space, and we're going to work another 4 double crochet cluster stitch. So we'll go again, we yarn over and we go into that space as if we're working a regular double crochet stitch, but we're not going to yarn over and complete. We're going to yarn over and begin another double crochet stitch, yarn over and pull through 2, and that gives us 3 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pop into that same place and begin your double crochet, yarn over into that chain 1 space, yarn over and pull through 2, and that will give us our 5 loops on the hook that we can then yarn over and complete the stitch with. And then we're going to chain 2, we're going to skip these 2, and then you've probably guessed it, work into this chain 1 space. So we work our cluster stitch into there, and then we chain 2. Now you'll notice in the pattern that this is written slightly differently to how I'm showing you it now. Well, it's not different at all, it's just the way that it's formatted in the pattern shows you a chain 1 at the beginning and a chain 1 at the end, because what we need to do is think of them in terms of 3. So the actual stitch repeat here is this chain 1, the cluster stitch, and then a chain 1 after it, so that when we get to the end it will all make perfect sense, she says. Because we end with a chain 1 and then a double crochet into the last stitch. So if you go ahead and work all of these repeats, and then I'll meet you back at the end and we'll finish the row together. So now here at the end of row 4, we've done our last cluster stitch into this chain 1 space. We're going to chain 1, we're going to skip the stitch here, and then we're going to work a double crochet into that last stitch, which will be your standing stitch or your chain and your double crochet, or however you chose to work that first stitch. And now the next row begins with a shorter stitch, so I'm going to break my yarn here and yarn over and join the new colour in that very last stitch. So that's yarn B we've just cut there, and we're going to work with yarn C next, So grab yarn C ready for row 5. So yarn over and complete that last stitch, and then we're going to turn our work ready for row 5. So row 5 begins with a chain 1 and then a half double crochet into that first stitch. And now bear with me, this row will seem a bit strange, I'm sure, but it works beautifully when you get it right. We are going to be working long stitches, so we're going to yarn over twice because we're going to make a US treble stitch, but we're not going to work it into the row below, we're going to work it into the V stitch here in the green that we have. So right down into this space here, and the important thing is here is we're going to straddle our cluster stitch and like enclose it. So we're going to yarn over twice, and again I'm holding my ends here for the tension that we need for this, because people really struggle sometimes with tall stitches and it's all about keeping your tension. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pop right down here into this chain 1 space. We're going to pull up a loop, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. And that's your nice tall stitch, and it's sitting to the right hand side or left hand side, depending whether you're right or left handed, in which direction you're going. It's going to be sitting to one side of your stitch. So then what we need to do is we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work another long stitch, another one of these treble stitches, but it's going to be on the opposite side of this cluster stitch. So you need to scoop your cluster stitch off, and then you're going to go into this chain 1 space again, but you're going to go to the opposite side of your cluster stitch. So here we go, and that is the repeat that we now have already for this row. So what we now need to do is carry on working that repeat. We're going to work this long treble stitch into the side of this chain 1 here. I shouldn't say it like that, should I? It's not into the side, it's into the chain 1 space, but to the side of your cluster stitch. And then you're going to chain 1, and then you're going to work another long stitch here, this treble stitch, but you're going to scoop this away, and you're going to make sure it sits to the other side of your cluster stitch. Just like that. And then we carry on all the way along. Don't be frightened of scooping your stitches and moving them around to make sure that you get in the right place. Chain 1, and the point, I've worked this quite a few times now, and the point that I sometimes get stuck at is when I put the hook in and try and pull the yarn through for this. It's very easy for it to get caught over the top of that cluster stitch. As you see, you need to make sure that it comes right over so it doesn't get caught on the top of the cluster stitch. And then give them a wriggle just to make sure the cluster stitches pop out. So work all the way along, and then I'll meet you at the end and we'll finish off the row together. So at the very last stitch of row 5, we've done our tall treble stitch, chain 1 and treble stitch either side of our cluster there, and we've got 1 stitch left to fill in here at the end, and we're just going to work a half double crochet into that last one. And then we again are starting the next row with a shorter stitch, so we're going to break our yarn at this point and change colour. Now I've been working with yarn C, and we're going to change to yarn D. So grab your yarn D and complete that final stitch with your new colour, and then we're ready to turn and start row 6. Now row 6 is a nice easy one. We're going to just be using half double crochet stitches for this one. We'll chain 1 as you see there, and then we're going to work a half double crochet into that very first stitch, and then each of our chain 1 spaces are going to get 3 half double crochets in them. Now sometimes they are quite tricky to find, so I find the easier thing to do once we get past this first one is to look for our set of 2 stitches here. So we have our first chain 1 space here, and so we're going to work 1, 2 and 3 half double crochet stitches in there, and then you see we've got our 2 treble stitches there, and then you'll find your chain 1 space. And I mean, it's fairly obvious because it's got like the size of a finger hole. It's a nice big hole that you can aim for. So we're going to do 3 half double crochets in each of our chain 1 spaces along. And then when you get to the last chain 1 space, you'll see you've got the last stitch at the very end, and we're going to work a half double crochet in that one. So I will meet you there. Now the last few stitches of row 6 that we're on, we are going to skip this one because we've worked our 3 half double crochet into this chain 1 space, and we are going to work a half double crochet into the last stitch here. But we're not going to complete with the same colour, we're going to change to yarn A. So break your yarn, grab yarn A, and then you yarn over and complete your stitch, and then we'll turn to work row 7. Now rows 7 and row 8 are beautifully lovely because we're going to chain 1, and all we're going to do is work a single crochet into every stitch that we come across. So this is row 7, and then row 8 is a repeat. Hurrah! So 2 rows of beautifully lovely straightforward single crochet stitches. So if you want to go, and they're both in A, so if you want to go ahead and work both of those, and then I'll meet you back here and we'll chat about what we do next. So there we have rows 7 and 8 complete, and what we're now ready to do is carry on and repeat this section, rows 3 to 8, once more, but in a different colour variety. But of course you can do it in whatever colours you like. But if I show you the other side of the blanket that I've already done that repeat on, so we switch our colours that we use for this tall row here and for our half double crochet row here. So if you want to go ahead and do this repeat here, these rows 3 to rows 8, and you'll finish on a nice solid single crochet row here. And then what we'll need to do is repeat that on the other side, so both of the long edges get this border on it. So if I shuffle it over, you'll see that's the one I've started here, and I just need to repeat 3 to 8 on there. So I'll go and do that now. You make sure you have them on both sides, and then meet me back here. Don't worry about weaving your ends in yet. I don't ever do that right until the end, because what we're going to do then next is swivel it to its side, and we'll work new panels along these edges. So we're going to cover the other raw sides that we have here. So go ahead, get bordering, get putting that panel on, and I'll meet you back here when you're ready to work these bits here, these next panels. And then finally, section 7 we are ready to do. It's really, really simple, and it's really, really similar to section 6. But we are going to now be working, as you see, this is what I'm showing you on the finished version so you can see where it sits before we start. We're going to be working along the sides of the sections we have just made, and then along the full length of the blanket here. And we'll go back and forth in rows just as we did with the previous section, and we're going to do this at either end of the blanket. And then once we've done that, we'll be ready to put this lovely simple border on to finish. So now we've completed both of the section 6 parts, we are ready to work along the other sides of the blanket and add section 7 to each side. So if you find in the pattern where it says section 7, we'll do that now. But the great thing about this is it'll be really familiar. It's really similar but not quite the same to the section 6 parts that we've just made. So what we're going to begin with is very much the same. We are going to work a row in A of single crochet all the way along the edge of this, and we're going to work along the edges of the side panels that we've just added as well. So we're going to encase the whole of this length of the blanket now. And we are going to need 125 stitches, which you will notice is exactly the same numbers as we worked down this first side here. So a multiple of 3 plus 2, and if you did change the number of your border, then just match the number that you worked along there. So we're going to join A to that first stitch, and I always chain 1 to get going, and then we're going to work as we did before into the sides of each of the stitches. This works quite nicely, this side here. It's good to get 16 stitches into the side of this panel here, and then 16 stitches into this panel here, and then the rest are evenly spaced along the edge of the blanket. So if we go ahead and work those 125, and then meet me back here and we'll be ready to work row 2. And you'll notice that I've not yet weaved in my ends here, and that's not honestly being me being lazy, I promise. It's because I do find if you weave in your ends and you do them really securely, then when you're trying to work into the edges of the stitches, into the sides here, it makes it really difficult if you've oversewn or woven in the ends there. So it's really deliberate, she says. No, honestly, it's completely deliberate. Now here we are at the end of that row 1. We've done 125 stitches across there, and all we now need to do is turn over, and for row 2 we're going to do just as we did with the other panels. We're going to chain 1 and then we're going to single crochet in each stitch across. So we'll have 125 at the end of this row, and then we'll change colour. So if you want to get to the end of the row and break your yarn, and then we'll be ready to work row 3. Now here we are at the end of that row 2, and you're going to break your yarn, and then you decide how you want to join yarn F. Yes, just checking. Yes, yarn F. Check how you want to join your yarn, whether you want to yarn over and pull through here, or whether you want to work your standing stitches as we did in the other panel. Either way is absolutely fine. I'm going to show you joining that one there, and then we can turn our work to begin row 3. And using F, this is going to be exactly the same as the row 3 that we worked here with our V-stitches. So if you've joined like I have there, you're going to do a nice chain 1 there, and then do a double crochet in that first stitch. And then what we're going to do is skip the next one, and we're going to work our V-stitch in the next stitch along. So a double crochet, a chain 1, and a double crochet all into that same stitch. And then we skip 2 stitches, and then we work our next V-stitch into the next stitch. And we carry on just as we did with the row 3 of the previous panels, up until we get to the last place of our V-stitch. Then we will skip 1 and then work a double crochet into the last stitch. So go ahead and do that, and then meet me back ready to join our next colour of yarn. Okay, so the end of row 3 completes that V-stitch. We skip this one, and then we work a double crochet into the last stitch. And this time we're going to break our yarn because we have a shorter stitch that we're doing the next row, and we need yarn B. And for row 4 we're going to join yarn B here, and then we're going to turn our work. Now we're ready to start row 4. So row 4 is going to chain 1, and then we're going to work a half double crochet into that first stitch. Now this is where we start going differently from the panel that we worked on the other side, but it will be lovely and familiar because all we're doing is following the pattern that we did in the previous row, but we're going to work half double crochets instead. So we are going to be working into the chain spaces. The chain 1 space gets a half double crochet, a chain 1, and a half double crochet. And that's all there is to this row. So then we look for our next chain 1 space, we skip these 2 stitches, and we look for that chain 1 space there, and we do a half double crochet, chain 1, and a half double crochet all into that chain 1 space. Skip these 2, and then into that chain 1 space, half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet. Work that all the way along. Now here we are at the end of that row. We're going to skip this stitch and then work a half double crochet into this last one, and now we can either finish off there or you change to your next colour, which is colour C, depending on how you want to work this stitch. So it's a double crochet at the beginning of the next row, so I'm going to do another standing stitch just to show you. So if you want to do a standing stitch, you complete that stitch there of the last row, and we turn our work to the right side facing, and we are going to begin. I'm getting all tangled up here, goodness me. We're going to begin by popping the yarn over our hook twice there, and then you're going to anchor that end, and you're going to pop into your stitch and work a normal double crochet. But do just remember to keep the anchor on your stitch because it will be much easier and less floppy and less less annoying. It took me a long time to work that out though, so don't be hard on yourself if you're finding those tricky. And if you are finding them tricky, don't worry about them at all. You can come back to them another day, but it's a really great thing to practice and get the knack of if you can. So now for row 5, we've begun with that first double crochet there, and what we're doing for this row is we are going to be working down into row 3. Now row 3 is what we've got with this green here, so that was our double crochet V stitches, and you remember on the other panels we worked into the sides of these V's here, but we're not going to do that now. We're going to actually work in between the stitches here. So any stitches that sit together without a chain 1 space, we want to work down into this space here and down into this space here, because there's 2 stitches. You see 1 and 2 there, and again here we go, and you work along. So all the chain 1 spaces have been taken up already, so we're going to go in between these stitches that we have here. So I'll show you again. It's very difficult to put it into words sometimes. It's so much easier just to show you what I mean. So what we're going to do, it's going to work over and into this space here, and we're going to pop a double crochet into that space, and then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to pop this next space here. That it's not a chain, it's just a space between stitches, and they look like there's a massive space because obviously we skipped these 2 here, but the tops of the stitches are actually right next to each other. And what we're going to do is going to work a double crochet in that space and another double crochet in that space, and then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to find the next set of stitches together that we can work into, and we're going to work 1 double crochet and then 2 double crochets into that space. So you see they're nice and tall. We're elongating this section of the stitch so they sit over and above the other 2 rows that we've got underneath them. So then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work down into here, 1 and then 2. We're going to chain 1, find your next space, 1 and then 2. So what we're going to do, as you may have guessed, carry along the row, working those stitches, pulling them up to the height of your row. That's really, really important. It's very easy for this row to get a bit wibbly and a bit wonky. So you just need to make sure, have a little eyeball. Once you've done a few, make sure they're all the same height, because that's really, really important for this, because otherwise it will dip and dive and it won't be quite as you would like it to be. But carry on there up until you get to the last set of stitches together, and then we'll finish off the row together. Okay, so I'm coming to my last chain 1, and then I'm going to work in between these last 2 stitches that we have here. So a double crochet in there, and then finally it very often will cover up the end here, but you've got 1 more stitch to do at the end here. So make sure you tweak that out and then work 1 double crochet into that very last stitch of the row. And now the next row is going to have either a standing double crochet or a chain 1 and a double crochet, whichever you prefer. So I'm going to go back to and that's the other thing, like, it doesn't matter if you mix and match the way that you do things. Nobody's going to know. Don't tell anyone, but nobody's going to know. And even if they do, who cares, as long as you like it and as long as it looks beautiful. We're going to join yarn D for the next row. And you are going to turn, ready for row 6 now. My gosh, and there's a lot of blanket to turn now. We're going to chain 1, and we are going to double crochet into that very first stitch. Now what we're now looking for are these chain 1 spaces that we have here, and what we're going to do is we're going to mimic what we did on row 3, and we're going to work this V stitch into each of those chain 1 spaces. So it's really familiar, pretty much what we did there before, but we worked them into a stitch. In this one we're going to work a double crochet, a chain 1 and a double crochet all into that chain 1 space, and then we look, right, we don't need those 2 stitches, we're going to work into this chain 1 space here. So double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, and then that carries on all the way along till you get to your last chain 1 space, and then we will work a double crochet into the very last stitch of the row. And now I've just turned over already before I have finished the row, just to show you that you know everything that you need to know now for this whole panel. Because once we've finished this row, we are going to change colour to E, and we're going to repeat row 4, so that's the peachy row that we have here with the half double crochet V stitches. And then using C, which is the lighter pink colour, we're going to repeat that exact same row that we have there. And they will come down into the spaces between the stitches. And then rows 9 to 11 repeat rows 6 to 8. So you'll just do the same thing again. And then 12 and 13 using B and then F both repeat row 3. So that's this double crochet V-stitch pattern there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish the whole of this border here, and then I'll come back and I'll show you exactly how the colours sit and where they are, but you know all of the stitches that you need to know. So if you want to go ahead, skip ahead of me, then please do so. Go and look in the pattern for where you need to be and find out what comes next in the colour sequence and the rows, rather than just hearing me talk about it on video here. So go ahead, or just wait a second and I'll be back and I'll show you it in person. So now here we are, we have completed section 7, and this is what the colours look like. Obviously you can change yours to be however you would like them. Now we need to do this on both sides of the blanket, and then we'll be ready to pop this really simple border all around the edge to complete it.